Well, for more on climate change efforts, I spoke with Jen Austin. Jen is a policy director at We Mean Business, a global nonprofit coalition working with influential businesses to take action on climate change. And I began by asking Jen about the best solution to curb carbon emissions.
Climate, it's such a complex issue, and obviously carbon emissions come from so many corners of the economy, really every part of our modern life. And so the solutions are going to need to be equally complex, and they're going to need to be comprehensive. What's great about carbon pricing, or as Canada is doing the same thing, there's a number of ways you can design a carbon price. It can be a dividend, it can be a cap and trade, it can be a tax. The point is that you put a price on pollution so that there's less of that, and you put incentives behind innovation and low carbon solutions so that there are more and more people working on that. So I think there are a variety of ways in which that can work around the United States. Some of the states have that already. You've got states in New England with carbon prices, you have California with carbon pricing, and I think there's every reason to believe that can be a very important piece of the solution here in the U.S. And then, there are other elements that can be a part of that package to make sure that it's tailored and works well for different states and different industries.
And looking internationally, how are companies in other countries addressing this issue of climate change in their business?
Yeah, it's very similar. For starters, many of the companies who are here talking to lawmakers in Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. are global companies. They either have a global footprint in terms of their customers, and many of them have a global footprint in terms of where they're getting their supplies from. So their value chains up and down their supply chains are inherently global. And the economy and trade is global these days. And so many of these businesses, they're active here in Washington, D.C. Our coalition, the We Mean Business Coalition, is a global coalition. We have similar advocacy days in Brussels to talk to European policymakers, to be in the states around the U.S., to be in Japan, in India, in China. We've got businesses who the economics of all of these major economies impact their global supply chains, and oftentimes the more consistent those policies are around the world, the more simple it is for businesses then to make their plans.
And what about for China and companies there? Given their role not just as an emitter, but a country that's also now taken on this mantle of really trying to lead the charge in reversing some of these climate change fallout. How do you see their role in this?
I think it's an extremely important economy. It's growing fast. It has many major businesses there, and it's great to see them experimenting with carbon pricing. They are one of the jurisdictions that's been taking carbon pricing very seriously. They're working on a number of pilot markets. As I mentioned, the designs of different markets can be quite different. So what China has done is take a fairly exploratory approach and let different cities and states try different markets, and now they're working towards meshing that into a nationwide market. And I think for these companies who have supply chains over there, it'll be a very welcome development, and it'll be an important place to be proving and experimenting with and starting to figure out what some of the best designs can be.
Now, your organization works with some of the world's most influential businesses to really take action on climate change. But for a company that hasn't really been considering it, how do you pitch them on really making climate change policies a priority?
Sure. More and more, as we're talking to companies, they're seeing signs from a variety of angles that are helping them start to recognize the importance of this. Oftentimes, it's really just about thinking about it the way that businesses generally think about a lot of their decisions, which is understanding risk and weighing that up against opportunity. And so as the impacts of climate change become more and more visible around the world, companies are seeing that hit their bottom line. It's a problem that's starting to impact them here and now. You also hear from CEOs that in order for them to attract and retain talent, they need to be a company that is doing good in the world. More and more folks want to work for a company they feel good about, and recognizing how big an issue climate is means that they want to work for a company that's doing the right thing on climate. Same from the customer side. More and more customers are sort of letting their money talk and making sure that they're buying from companies that are living up to their values and what they expect there. So there's a number of drivers, and we're starting to see that come together and really start to motivate more and more companies. On the flip side, you're seeing technologies getting cheaper. You're seeing a lot of there are some real economic opportunities in the innovation potential there, and just in some of these new technologies, which are lower carbon and more affordable. A lot of companies are saving actually a lot of money as they work to implement their emissions reduction targets through efficiency and electric vehicles and renewable technology.
Now, when you talk about climate change and carbon emissions, it does seem like something insurmountable, essentially. When you look at some of the warnings, we saw that this week there was a study that showed global sea levels are rising much faster than previously estimated. And last October's report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says that we must reduce emissions on greenhouse gases to net zero by 2050 just to have a reasonable chance of limiting global warming. Do we have enough time to get to that point by 2050?
Yeah. It's a really important question. The answer is yes, but we don't have any time to waste in moving in that direction to get there. So the urgency of the problem, the severity of the impacts are, the science is more and more clear as to how big the impacts are already and how quickly those are coming. The good news is there's equally sort of a pathway to success on this issue. There's just no time to waste. And so decisions made over the next 5 and 10 years are going to be absolutely critical. And so I think of it as, there is still time to be optimistic, but there's no time to waste to get us onto that path.